Good morning. When we were planning this conference, and I agreed to give a short introduction, I didn't really realize I was going to end up placing myself between John Hockenberry and Roger Martin, and so it's sort of like committing speaker Harry-Carey. It's an honor to be here. I'm an advisor to the Center for Innovation, and a year ago agreed to help figure out what this conference might look like and see if we could expand our speakers beyond any of the worlds any of us were deeply familiar with. So I think we have a great agenda for you. This morning, I just wanted to take a few minutes. We keep talking about this word design, or designing health, or designing wellness. And I thought I'd just take a few minutes as a designer and give you some reflections on what that means to somebody from our side of the world. 3 years ago, I was on vacation with my family in Spain, and I got an email asking whether I'd be willing to come to Milan on my way home and attend a workshop sponsored by the Rockefeller Foundation called Designing for Social Change. I later found out that the reason my name was on that list was that Larry Keeley, our speaker last night, had recommended me. So I'm starting to feel like this is kind of a family event. But Rockefeller said I had to pay my own way, and I'm trying to figure out why does a foundation with so much money is not going to buy me a plane ticket to go, and I actually said no. And then there was a little conversation, and they said, well, we really want people to have skin in the game. And it turned out I could actually get to Milan by a $100 plane ticket change, and so I paid the $100, and I went to Milan. And I don't think I can get my wallet out over this mic, but I still carry a $100 bill. It's a reminder to myself that small investments in time and money can occasionally result in huge outcomes. At that meeting, we had 20 designers from 12 countries talking about the intersection of design and poverty. And I mean, in a weird way, that seems like a total non sequitur, like design and poverty. But if we break poverty down, it is everything from health to housing to food to water. And in almost every instance, there are people in the world trying to figure out how to deliver better delivery systems. And in a lot of cases, those people working on those projects are not aid workers anymore, they're actually designers. We're trying to figure out what are the vessels by which people can move water? What are the systems by which people can move water? And I don't know, something happened to me as a communications designer thinking about decades of work, creating, being a hipster and creating very cool cultural things in New York City for cultural institutions, or being a branding expert and trying to figure out how to build reputations for corporations and media companies. There was something about this challenge. Could design contribute to things like health and housing and food and water? That I frankly became kind of a mission. And I was fortunate to have Rockefeller basically say, why don't you take 2 years and figure out if you can help organize designers to actually participate in this realm. And so my reflections today are really based on the last couple of years. I organized a conference in Europe with 20 museums talking about how do we collect and archive and exhibit the objects of social change. How do we exhibit things that move water or that test for HIV in South Africa instead of just Italian teapots? We've formed a network of 25 universities that are running social innovation programs that are based on design methodologies. We held an Aspen Summit that a number of speakers were involved in which we brought UNICEF and the Mayo Clinic and the CDC and the state of Alabama to actually work on concrete projects. And 2 years later, 3 out of those projects are still alive and still kicking, and there's still teams working on them in a new collaborative way. So I'm encouraged by these things, but if I step back and sort of say, what have I learned a few thoughts for these proceedings. First of all, when we talk about designing solutions, the solution has to be a solution to something that we usually call a problem. 15 years ago, if you asked most designers what they do, they would say they were problem solvers. That typically meant that a client came to them, said, I need you to do this. The designer got paid, and the designer did that thing the client wanted. And problem solving was very narrowly designed, and therefore design's participation in lots of realms was pretty limited. But what we're actually finding when we start talking about larger problems, it takes a different kind of engagement. If we start talking about wickedly hard problems, something that one of our panelists could talk about quite a bit, Hugh Dubberly, in one of his panels, if we start talking about wickedly hard problems, there actually are not, there's no clear path there, or the data sets are too large for any of us to ever see through the cloud of the data. And so this whole issue of problems is really, really a critical one. And the one thought that designers bring to the table, I think, that's really critical is it's kind of came up last night a little bit when John was talking about why, I don't remember what he said exactly, but it was something like, why do we do this thing? Designers would never do that because they'd ask the question differently. If somebody says, how do you change a light bulb to a designer, they'll simply say, why does it have to be a light bulb? So there's this question of how do we frame the problem? And we're often finding that it isn't, that the solution doesn't come because we want to go from point A to point B, but we actually redefine what point A is. And often that's because we go back to the very beginning and we start trying to create a series of scenarios, a series of stories that explore what is this thing we're calling a problem. The second thing is that I think as designers, we used to think that we designed primarily things. We designed, if we wanted to create communications, we designed posters or websites. If we wanted to work in an emergency room, we designed devices or machines. But increasingly, we're finding when we start talking about health, that the machine is only a part of a larger system. And that we actually have to start doing systems thinking, and that we're really talking about design on an entirely different plane. The other thing I've seen traveling the world is I'm now in a lot of meetings where the only thing I see are PowerPoint presentations and Post-it notes. I have a feeling that that's true for a lot of you too. But designers are actually used to, kind of come out of an arts tradition where we're actually trying to manage figure out how do we be creative every day. And we're often finding that, it actually helps to be messy. It actually helps to not work in clean, sterile environments or cool corporate headquarters, that we somehow have to make a mess in that room that looks different, that changes the way we work every day. At Teach for America, I'm undertaking a challenge to think about how do we create a culture of creativity in an organization that is fundamentally based on analytics, outcomes, and really measuring what is this thing we call transformational teaching. But the PowerPoint culture actually really limits what we do there. The other thing I guess personally I would say is I have an entire career that is based upon the idea that at some point I had some expertise, that I knew something other people didn't. And as designers, I think we typically used to sort of say, oh, you can trust us. We have a black box. We're going to go back and we're going to be, get wild and crazy and be really creative. And then I'm going to come back and show you what is the answer to your problem and what that solution looks like. Increasingly, my experience is that I don't really know very much about the problems I'm working on. I'm finding more and more that I need to sit in teams with other people that know more about different parts of these scenarios or these stories we're telling than I know. And more importantly, we're finding that the problems we're working on usually involve people. And that if we actually start involving the people who we're trying to help in the scenarios and the stories we're trying to understand, that they become co-designers with us. And that is such a shift, because what it basically does is say, you know, there may be some experience and there may be some expertise, but there better be a basic sense of humility to participate in new ways in which creativity and new thinking can actually lead to innovative solutions. So at this conference, we're going to talk a lot about design. It won't be the only topic on the agenda. We'll talk about technology, we'll talk about games, we're going to talk about data, we're going to talk about food. But I think a theme that's going to run through this conference is this idea that we all, in some way, are designers. And we're all trying to learn how to harness new creative energy to create innovative solutions that actually have impact in the world and help us deal with these very wicked problems. So with that, I want to say thank you. It's so great to have everybody here, and on behalf of the Center for Innovation, welcome.